Okay, you are looking at the Grey Ghost. The Grey Ghost is simply the Queen Mary, and it was painted gray during the war years of the Second World War and was used as a troop transport. Now, this little series that I'm doing, I'm talking about RAW, R-A-W, encounters. And RAW backwards is war. Now, I have never been in the military, and I have never been in anything like you call war with bombs and bullets and all that nonsense. However, in my lifetime, I have met many men who were in the military and who were in places of what we call war. And so in each of these videos, I'm going to try to describe to you my encounters with those individuals. They are not my stories, so to speak. They are the stories of the individuals that I have encountered over the years of my life. So I want to talk about a man who served during the Second World War, and he vividly recounted to me being on the Queen Mary. Now keep in mind, the Queen Mary was nicknamed the Grey Ghost because the vessel, which you can see here in a more modern picture, the vessel was painted gray so that it would blend in a little more with the ocean and the sky and everything like that, and, quote, not make it an easy target for the under-the-water U-boats that are lurking somewhere nearby. God only knows where, but that's what the hoax history tells you, that they're out there lurking around and they just can't wait to shoot a torpedo and sink a boat. Now, as the story goes, Hitler and his staff put a price on the Grey Ghost for all the so-called U-boats that are hanging out in the water. Now, most likely there were no U-boats anywhere, and if there were U-boats, they went to some island somewhere and partied. But the Grey Ghost was supposed to be a big target. And this man told me of his experience of being on the Grey Ghost, going from United States to Great Britain. And he told me of his fear. His fear was shared among all those pretty much who were on the troop transport. His fear was that there would be a U-boat, an undersea vessel that we call a submarine, but in the German world they call them U-boats, Untersee vessel. He was fearful that there would be a periscope pop up somewhere, and down in the depths of the water he would hear German spoken, Achterleben! And there would be someone pushing a button and a torpedo would come and strike the Queen Mary and cause the Queen Mary to sink. Now, of course, this is what was in his mind. And I feel pretty confident that most of the men on that vessel would have had some level of fear that this could happen. Because obviously it's a very huge vessel and would make a very nice target. So let me finish here with the story of this man that I met. From England, I guess he went to North Africa, and he worked with the Air Force bombers, which at that time were actually part of the Army, So the Air Force didn't come into existence until much later. But he worked in that department of repairs and upkeep for the planes, for the bombers or whatever, cargo planes, whatever. Now, in all of his descriptions to me, he never once mentioned anything at all about danger. In fact, it was just the opposite. He loved to recall to me the famous beer run. And I guess it's a lot like it they show you sometimes in the movies, that they would get one of these planes and they would go to wherever there was cargo being unloaded. And of course the cargo that the soldiers wanted was beer. And then the plane would return and unload the cargo where they were all stationed, and they would have some beer. No reports of bombs dropping on him, and indeed no reports of any plane destroying anything. Of course, he might not know because he was in repairs. But here's the thing. After the war ended, many of these service personnel formed support or fun groups. I'm going to call them fun groups because they really weren't support groups. And they would get together maybe every other year, every 3 years, sometimes even once a year. Now, the man that shared with me his stories always looked forward to getting together with his buddies where he was stationed in the bomber group. And they have numbers for them and units and all that. So everybody that was in that unit was invited to come and recall the days of being in the Second World War. And I could tell by the look on his face when he would tell me, he would say, well, I'm going to my bomber group this year, and it's meeting out in Chicago, or it's meeting down in New Orleans, whatever. They would meet somewhere different every year in the US of A. And he had the look of delight on his face. He just couldn't wait to go and see his buddies. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but keep in mind, for World War II, at least in my experience, of meeting folks, this was not for support. This was, let's have a dinner, let's get a few drinks, let's talk, let's have a dance hall so we can dance with our wives or whatever. They didn't get together to cry and mourn. They didn't get together to say, oh, I'm hurting because. Now, there's a difference. What I'm trying to get at is this. If the Second World War brought all the destruction that you read about, and if it was a living nightmare, why would this man want to get together with his buddies and talk about the Second World War? It doesn't make sense, because who wants to sit around and talk about their traumas unless it's a support group? It was not a support group. It was a fun group whereby they met for the purpose of socializing and have fun. So I say all of this to support the theme that we've been hoaxed. A man doesn't look forward to getting together with other buddies and recall horrors. He got together because he had fun. And what do they have to talk about? Stories like the beer run. They're not sitting there talking about, oh, our bombardier group blew up thousands of factories and there was death toll at its highest on this particular date. they're having fun at these reunions or whatever they called them. Now, this is fairly typical of World War II. Now, once you get to other wars, like Vietnam and even like the current ones, it becomes more of a support group thing. All right? But as far as everything that I could hear coming from this man, and I was around him for about 10 years. So when I say he told me he was getting ready to go to his group, his bomber support group, and he had a look of joy on his face, I'm talking about I knew him, I worked with him, I was around him for 10 years. And every time he brought that subject up, he was just delighted. So anyhow, these are videos that are going to try to recall to you people that have recalled to me. So in a way, they're secondhand. And that's why I call them raw encounters. It's war backwards. They're war encounters, but not direct, indirect, through people who served in the military and who were, quote, in a war situation. So I hope it's helpful, and I'll have some more raw encounters for you. I've met a lot of people over the years, and I'll tell you some of the things they told me. Thank you for watching.